This is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. Humility. What comes to your mind when you hear that word? Maybe the better question is, what should come to your mind when you hear that word? I mean, let's face it. We see many verses in the Scriptures for us to be humble. Micah 6:8. He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does Yahweh require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. This is important. So, what does that mean? Over and over again, we see instructions to humble ourselves. But what keeps us from humbling ourselves? The obvious answer is pride. No one wants to look bad, right? But our ultimate goal is to make Him look good, not us. Submitting to Him puts the focus on Him looking good and not caring how we look. Not submitting to Him puts the focus on us looking good and not caring what He wants. As John the Baptist said, He must become greater, and I must become less. How can a servant have pride? Prideful servant. That's truly an oxymoron. They just don't go together. If we have pride, it's not always easy to see it from our own perspective. Sometimes our own stubbornness can blind us. That stubbornness is what the Bible calls being stiff-necked. We have a teaching on that if you're interested. Humbling oneself is a choice. Yes, it's a choice. It's all about overcoming self. We live in a world that seems to teach or promote the exact opposite of humility. And the arrogance or just promotion of self can be justified in so many different ways. But again, it's not about us. It's about what He does through us. Everything we do on our own is going to eventually burn. Only what we do in Him will last. Ultimately, without Him, we can have nothing, be nothing, and do nothing. The sooner we acknowledge that and live that, the better. If we aren't careful, everything we think we've accomplished on our own will eventually crumble before our very eyes. The rug will be pulled right out from under us. If we don't walk humbly in Him, the time will come when we force Him to humble us. Luke 14:11. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And 2 Samuel 22, verse 28. You save the humble, but your eyes are on the haughty to bring them low. James 4:6. But He gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Yahweh opposes the proud. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Just because you claim to follow Yahweh, it doesn't mean you don't have pride in your life. Pride is deceptive. Oh, sure, you can say you're a humble individual, present yourself in a humble way to those around you. You can even have a true desire to know and grow in Yahweh. But how do you treat others who differ with your belief? Seriously, do you feel the need to cut them down? To belittle them in any way? Make them look like they obviously don't know the Scriptures as good as you? I mean, you've got all the verses backing you up. You know you're not wrong. So let's just show the world how stupid these other believers really are. Right? Ephesians 4:2. Be completely humble. and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Have you ever considered the thought that while you may be bearing with someone else concerning what they believe, they're doing the same for you? Philippians 2:3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. What's selfish ambition? What's vain conceit? It's, look what I did. Look what I know. Let me show you where you're wrong. Even Yahweh says, come, let us reason. Not, come, let me show you where you're wrong. Titus 3:2. To slander no one, to be peaceable and considerate, and to show true humility toward all men. Humility is the foundation to the second greatest command, to love your neighbor as yourself. You can't love your neighbor while looking down on them through condescending pride. It's impossible. Oh, you can say it, but your actions and attitudes will be screaming the opposite to everyone around you. Having a condescending attitude toward others may lift you up in your eyes, but it sinks you low in the eyes of Yahweh. Humility is not a one-time act. It's to be a lifelong attitude and process. It's a daily and vital element to the life of a believer. We can't forget that Yahweh truly rewards those who walk humbly in Him. Psalm 25:9. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them His way. He guides the humble. He teaches them. All wisdom and knowledge flows through Him. You don't find something because of your diligence. No. Whatever you know, it's because He first opened your understanding to it. Just as we see Yeshua did for the disciples after they were with Him during His ministry on earth. Again, without Him, we can have nothing, be nothing, and do nothing. The sooner we acknowledge that, the better. And if you aren't humbling yourself, you aren't acknowledging it. Let's look at some verses that discuss humility. But as we do, please don't just listen or look at these verses. Please dwell on them. Let them sink into your heart. Let them challenge you. In fact, before we go over a bunch of verses, let's consider one of my favorite verses and ponder it for just a second. I believe this verse is truly needed before we consider these others on humility. The verse is found in Romans chapter 12. Romans 12:3. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. You see, all too often we can look at a verse and consider it from the wrong perspective. We need to read the scriptures in the view of, how does this apply to me? Am I letting it apply to me, or am I too blind to admit that it actually does apply to me? We're all guilty of thinking too highly of ourselves at one point or another. And just because we conquered it yesterday, it doesn't mean we don't have to fight it off today. So please, as we go through these verses, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. Okay, let's begin. Proverbs 11:2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 15:33. The fear of Yahweh teaches a man wisdom, and humility comes before honor. Proverbs 18:12. Before his downfall, a man's heart is proud, but humility comes before honor. Proverbs 22:4. Humility and the fear of Yahweh bring wealth and honor and life. Proverbs 3:34. He mocks proud mockers and gives grace to the humble. Proverbs 18:27. You save the humble, but bring low those whose eyes are haughty. Psalm 147:6. Yahweh sustains the humble, but casts the wicked to the ground. Psalm 149:4. For Yahweh takes delight in his people. He crowns the humble with salvation. 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, all of you, live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic. Love as brothers. Be compassionate and humble. 1 Peter 5:5. Young men, in the same way, be submissive to those who are older. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Colossians 3:12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Again, clothe yourselves with humility. Just as every person wakes up in the morning and clothes themselves for the day, we should do the same thing spiritually by clothing ourselves with humility. Just as we get ready for the day physically, we should be getting ourselves ready spiritually just the same, to clothe ourselves with humility. We shouldn't walk out the door until we clothe ourselves in humility. James 4:10. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Humility is a choice. It's all about controlling yourself. As silly as it may sound, years ago our son made a teaching on this very topic, titled, Be Humble. Yes, it's made for children, but maybe it's time we become like little children. Plus, you may want to consider our teaching titled, The Heart of Daniel. This is a topic that could go on and on. There's just so much to cover on it. But I'd like to close with a familiar verse. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Please note, it all starts with humbling ourselves. It all starts here. What is he asking of you that requires you to humble yourself? Don't hesitate. Please don't hesitate. Humble yourself now. Humble yourself. Do whatever he is asking you and do it now. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.